Well, hey everybody, welcome back to So You Want to Be in Ministry. I'm Tim. I'm so glad to have you here today. We are all about educating you if you're thinking about jumping into ministry. We are about equipping you if you're already in, and we are about encouraging you if you're considering jumping out because you're just in a tough season. We also want to empower you to follow godly leaders well. If you're not even considering ministry, you just want to know more about it and maybe some of the things that your pastor's walking through or your ministry director's walking through. We want to empower you to be able to follow them well. And so that's what we're all about. Today we get to talk to John Helmkamp. He is the Director of Operations at Metro Community Church. We've been layering out this series, Planning a Weekend. And in our last episode, we got Seth Connerly, who layered out what this Transcendent Framework looks like. And John is going to be talking about the funnel that we put it down to get it to our ministry areas that you've seen in the first 4 episodes of this series. So we get a lot. It's very detail heavy, but the last 15 to 20 minutes of it is very applicable. We have some fun talking about how we apply this to different areas of our ministry and different areas even on a campus. So I hope you'll stick around or even jump forward to it so you can get an idea of what this looks like as it's fleshed out and really happening, heading towards a weekend. So enough of me talking. Thank you so much for checking it out. And here's John. Well, hey, John, so glad to have you here on the podcast today. Looking forward to talking through how we get to the weekend from everything that they should have heard from Seth's episode. So looking forward to this, man. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. And looking forward to trying to follow up what it was a great episode with Seth.
Yeah, it absolutely was. Lots of stuff, and yet we probably could have talked, as we've joked about, we could have talked for like 5 more hours about everything.
Yeah, you got a 4 or 5-parter coming with him.
Yeah, absolutely. So we can move on to how we get from all of that and going through a framework and filtering it all to all the things that you're going to walk through to get us to it shows up on a weekend and everybody's just enjoys it, and it's like it was 1 hour of their life, and yet it made a God impact. But we had to navigate all of that to even get to that point. So what are the like overarching things that you do to help filter it into the weekend?
Yeah, and so like even going back to Seth a little bit, and seriously, guys, if you missed that podcast, go back and listen to that episode. It was great. It really sets up the framework for the whole church. And then, he calls it and it's not a model. I heard that part for sure. It is definitely not a model. I will not use that word for anybody that caught that. So Seth obviously set up the framework for a transcendent church. And so now we want to add the word service to that. So we needed to create the transcendent framework for a church service, because that's what we're trying to do on the weekends, obviously. And so there are a couple of steps before we even get to like the week to week or every other week in our church's case, brainstorms where we're actually doing creative brainstorms for the church service. And so the next step for us was to take Seth's framework, and I'm just going to pop that up here just for a quick second in a review, or if you haven't had a chance to catch that one yet, I want to make sure that we just touch on this. This is obviously the framework that Seth went through, and you can see the 5 kind of pillars, if you will. The things that need to exist are in there, and they're relevant, missional, transcendent, relational, and systematic. And so our goal then was to take those and put them in a framework where we can go, what's the goal for a service? What are we shooting for in a service? And where do these things matter? How much do they matter? And so the first thing we needed to do, really, there's a couple steps in this. The first thing we needed to do is this next one, where we just went and we listed all of the things that could possibly be in a service over the weekend. I'm going to pull up another one for you here that is kind of the list for that. We did several. We did the things that are out of service, which I'm not going to touch on a ton today, but you'll see. And then we did this one, which is the elements that are in the service. And so you can see we listed a lot more than this, people. We just started with an open brainstorm with all the creatives in the room. And we said, what are the things that happen in service and that we're going to shoot for, that we're able to use to help create a transcendent church service.
Just to give people an idea there, because not everybody would understand like a bad idea board or something like that. So like, was it like 40 or 50 things that you've sifted through to get to 12?
Yeah, I think this was in the neighborhood of 25 to 30.
Okay. All right.
That were and a lot of them overlapped. And then these are the core ones where like, this is it. These are the elements that we care about, that we have available to us. But only that, I think one of the key things is, what do we aspire to have happen as well? And so that was a key one. In fact, I'll talk about that again in a couple of minutes. And so we got that whittled down. And, I mean, as simple as can be, we literally just got in the room, started on the whiteboard, prayed to start the meeting, talked about this, set up the framework again, and then said, what are the things? And then we just listed them all. And then we went back and circled the ones that were prominent, that were for sure in. And then we debated. I mean, this was multiple meetings to get to this final framework. And there was a lot of debate, and it was great debate. And the debate formed a lot of what we even believe. It's kind of like, when you're starting a country and a government and you've got this big thing that's the Constitution, it's all the little things that come out of that are just learned, that aren't actually written down, that become your culture and what you're striving for. So same concept here.
Yeah, so good. People need to catch that too. If you're a pastor and you're involving like creatives, whether they're on staff or not, it's okay to have some of this healthy conflict where you're like, man, is that really a thing? Or I don't know. They're like, you need that back and forth to get to a really good place. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, it was a great, I use the word debate. It was a fantastic conversation. I mean, It was super fun to be a part of. And there were some where, because we had multiple parts of this, because we were doing like an hour and a half at a time, and then we'd give it a week and we go back again, where we would come back to them the next week and someone would go, I want to challenge that, or I want to talk about that one again. That was great. And so the other thing that it creates, Tim, is tremendous buy-in when you're done, because everyone has been a part of it. Even if you don't get to get exactly what you would desire, you got to have a say in it, and you were a part of the final decision. And really everyone at the time we got to the end of this was on board because they were along for the entire journey. So here are the ones that we came up with that we wanted to put in our final framework. And again, this is not the final one yet, but the things we aspire to, most important, they just happen to be up here because I put them in alphabetical order. And you'll see in a minute that authenticity and biblical are the top two things that we want to aspire to and make sure that they happen. And then there were a whole bunch of other things. Not going to spend a lot of time on these, but an in-service element, we always wanted to make sure there was a challenge that took place in the service that was personal. So like what are you walking out with? What has God talked to you about? What's the Holy Spirit put on your heart that you need to walk out feeling challenged and you need his help to work through? And then communal as well. What are we as a church? What are we as a community? What need to be challenged in by God in this? Clear next steps. You've got to have a next step. Like, you don't want to walk out of church going, that was great, and you have nothing to do the rest of the week after that, and you don't think about it. And not only like personally, but again, this one is also even for the church. We always want to make sure if someone's new, if someone's wondering what's the next step, what do they do spiritually? What do they do to join the church? So our first step class, or it could be salvations, baptisms. We want to make sure clear next steps are a thing that are in services. Engaging worship. Of course, we all want to have not just worship. We added the engaging word. Excuse me. This was one of those second things that somebody brought back up after the first week and said, no, it's not just worship. It needs to be engaging worship that we're striving for. Prayer was something, it's an in-service element. And man, we have been really challenged because sometimes it can be easy to think of prayer at times in a service as a transition. And that is not the heart. That is not at all what we want it to be. Nope. And so one of the things that came out of this is a very practical application that we chose and discussed as a team, is that a lot of times, not always, but when there's a prayerful moment at the end of worship and we're moving from worship into the message, we would let all the band members and all the vocalists leave the stage, and the table and the chair or whatever the pastor would need would come out. And we went, no, this This is a moment of transcendence for the church, for everyone there, and for the people on stage. Why would we leave in the middle of a transcendent moment? Prayer is one of the most transcendent things that we can do in our lives. Why would we interrupt that for anyone to have a distraction, or just almost accidentally let the congregation know it's not a big deal because we're shuffling things around during a prayer? And that was just a decision that we decided to make that came out of this revolving around prayer. Then there's properly balanced gifting. Seth even talked about that in the last episode about, man, if the right person isn't singing, it can distract from transcendence. So he talked about God, Paul writes continuously to the church. We want to remove distractions. We also want to put the best foot forward, our best talents in the right places. We're having a response time in a service where they actually have a time to talk to God. The pastor's asking for it, the host at the end of the service, whatever it is. Series specific elements that are very specific to the series. You'll see in a minute. Actually, I'm going to hold on that. I'll come back to that one in a second. But that's something that really only pertains to the series and doesn't really have a lot to do with transcendence or the God movement in it. And I'll talk about that in a minute.
Okay.
But then some space for transcendence. Obviously, there's space inside of worship for transcendence. There's space inside of the message, inside of prayer. But we want to also look for, is there any other space in the service that we should could create, allow space for that's not the normal ones? So we wanted it to be in there by itself as well.
Okay.
And then transcendent focused message, obviously that's the pastor and what the message is. And we want to make sure that that is transcendent as well, getting them an experience and encounter with a living God that wants to interact with their lives. So those are what we whittled down to. Once we got to that level, we then went and put them in the different categories that are those 5 kind of pillars that we were talking about. And you can see engaging worship. We put in the in service, and you'll see on the left-hand side, we did an out of service one again, but I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that one. Engaging worship was on the outside, and it was a part of being relevant. Worship is very relevant and can be very relevant. And so even like the song selection and different things that we're doing in service, we need to make sure those things are relevant to our culture, our church, and the world around us.
I would even, on that level, even we didn't talk about this when Travis was on, but even in that season of life, because we've actually switched songs, not because the song was bad. We would have sang it that day, but because of what was happening in our nation or world, we've actually just taken out, because we're like, we think this would totally send people a different direction right now. Like,
yeah. And even like one of the poster child examples for that is there's a song, well, there is a song, but we don't do it anymore, but it was called Fierce.
Yeah.
And one of the lines in the song was like a hurricane. Yeah. God's love is a tidal wave, right? Well, when literal hurricanes are going on and people's lives are being ruined, we were like, we can't do this song this week.
Yeah.
And we had, of course, no idea that was going to happen that week. And so that's even just a very practical example of that. The other thing we do is we can call for some spontaneous worship that has something to do with what the pastor's got going on that week that was not previously planned from a list that the band already knows. So just all kinds of things in that. And so it needs to be relevant to what's going on in the service, the message, the world, everything that's going on around us. You can also see that, they're all listed in here that I just talked about. Engaging worship is also transcendent, but it did not make the missional thing category for us. And so again, we're picking and choosing where do these actually fit. And this was also a whole nother level of debate and discussion on is worship missional. And unless you're choosing a specific song that has an action item that happens to be missional towards outreach, local, those kind of things, we decided in general it's not. Okay. But that was just us. And you may decide for your church that it is. And that's great. But for our culture, that's what we decided. So we put all those in there, and then I'm going to switch back to this tab and kind of show the reveal here of where these all fit, because we put them all in those categories. Then we came back and we tallied it up, as you can see, and we went, there were a lot of them that had all 4 of these boxes checked, which brings me to one other thing. As you can see, I've removed systematic from this section. And you're going to see in the very final framework in a moment that systematic is something that in and of itself was not a part of the transcendent framework for the church service of just transcendence, but it cannot be missed because your systems produce the outcomes that you're trying to hope for.
Yeah.
And so we pulled it out of the elements in service and these categories, but it is still an important part. And so you'll see on the final product, it's still there. So we went through these, and then this is how we came up with the tiers for these different things. As you can see, biblical authenticity were the top two. They both had 4. Challenge personal communal was in all 4. Look at some of these that aren't. Proper balanced gifting, excuse me, only fell into the transcendent category, as did series-specific elements. That fell into just relevancy, and space for transcendence fell into just transcendence. And so you can kind of see those are kind of already, just because they're ones, they were on our bottom tier of this. So if we move over to this other tab that, hang on one second, is kind of the final framework. There we go. We put it into tiers. So top tier, and you saw on the previous page that there were several of them that had 4. They hit all 4 buckets. Yeah. But because these 2 are the most important and they were the absolute, if these things are not the priority, we missed. They were, it doesn't matter what else we do. If it's not biblical and it's not authentic, we have missed. It doesn't matter how well we did the other things in the other categories. And so it was something that we aspire to above everything else. And so we made them their own tier on purpose to keep in front of our team at all times. If we don't do this, we missed. And then you can see the other things that were in tier 2. Those were all ones that had all 4, and 3 of the 4 made tier 2. And then tier 3, and this is where I'm going to talk about the series specific elements. And you'll see I added the words thematic, kind of theming, and holidays.
Okay. And
these are specific things that we do every once in a while. I'm talking 4 or 5, maybe 6 times a year. So 10% of a 52-week year. We're doing an element that's either series specific, themed, or holiday. I'll give you an example of one we just it was leading into Valentine's Day weekend, and we just wanted to have some fun with the church at the beginning. It was very relevant to what was going on at the time, but that was it. It wasn't meant to be transcendent. It didn't take you anywhere, even with the theme of the message of the series that day. And we've done this 2 years in a row on Valentine's Day. Last year, we had our lead pastor and his wife. This year, you did it with your wife, Rachel. And we had our young adults pastor do it at the Edwardsville campus with his wife, Lakin. Yep. And we played the shoe game that was videoed, which if you've never been to a wedding reception or played the shoe game, you've missed. It's quite fun. Where each spouse sits back to back so they can't see each other. And they each raise either their shoe or their spouse's shoe in answering questions, and they can't see which the other is answering. And then it's always fun. And you guys had a blast with that from the video I saw.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was fun disagreeing with my wife at times, and it was also fun that she could make fun of me a little bit, especially on days off, about my days off. Yeah.
And it was relevant to the time of the year that was going on. It was relevant to the church, and that they got to see you in a different way than they normally do. Like a lot of people in our church don't get to see our staff interact with their spouses and have fun and disagree on some things. So that was a series specific, or that one would have been a holiday theme type specific thing that we did. Yeah. And again, we do them very few times because it's really not something that leads to transcendence, and that is our goal for the service. But there are specific reasons why we do that, to have a good time, to get them engaged, to just things like that, to talk about the time of year. Valentine's is going on for everybody. So it's something we all experience. So we've now got it layered out in our tiers. So that kind of rounds out that section, actually.
Okay.
So we put this in front of everybody. We took weeks. We've prayed about it. We've got this finalized, and this is what we're shooting for in our services now.
So with that, I have an initial question of when you talk about space for transcendence, could you talk a little bit more about that? Because that might be I don't know that I fully grasp it. I'm guessing it's a very foreign concept, maybe outside of our church.
Yeah. So um, let's talk about it in the example of prayer for a moment.
Okay.
Obviously, prayer is a time where you enter into a conversation with the God of the universe, and again, praise Him for that amazing ability that He's given us. And so that is a transcendent space in and of itself, because you go to and you are thinking about God and praying. But a lot of times, we're always praying, which is transcendent from the stage, and they have the ability to be praying with us. But a lot of times you're listening and thinking about God, but you're not actively participating. Some people do, but not the majority of our church does not. And so we went, why do we not allow time inside our own prayers to even just say, now you just spend 30 seconds talking to God about the same thing.
Okay.
That's additional space for them that we wouldn't have normally thought of to create if we hadn't had something that, whoa, did we create any space for transcendence in this? Additional time and worship we will offer them and encourage them. And I think this is one of the things is like, we have to, it doesn't just happen organically. You have to like turn on your blinker in the service and let them know, hey, we're about to take a right turn here. Mm-hmm. Will you come along for the ride with us? Like, follow us as we move on to this new street. And here's what we want you to do when you get to that street. So the prayer was an example inside of worship. We stop as we're going into song. A lot of songs have songs where you just sing, oh, different things like that. That can be a very transcendent thing for people to sing on their own. And so we may even give them space to just do that while our leader is doing it, but it's not inside the structured part of the song. It's afterwards. It's before, or we take a break in the middle of the song and just sing, sing to Him, talk to Him right now in your own, whether it's out loud or just in your own mind. Those are additional spaces for them to enter into very directly, for them to you, them to God spaces for that. So does that help kind of?
Yeah, that's good. So we had a moment, this was several months ago, but we had a moment where we literally referenced a past series. And we talked about one of the Hebrew words, and we even said that the Hebrew word deals with spontaneous singing, and then we gave space to sing spontaneously to God. So would that be one of those types of spaces?
Absolutely. It was very creative, it was structured, but we went, let's not always be doing it and having them do it with us. Those moments feel more like this is just your time to do it, because no one's leading it. It's just there. And yes, the worship leaders, the vocalists, the band members are modeling it because they're just singing along and in the presence of whatever God's doing as well in the service. So you see them doing it, but it's time for you to go, okay, this is my time to just talk directly to God, me and Him in that moment.
Awesome. And then how do you walk through the creative planning to make sure anything that you're doing, maybe that's the out of the service side of things, but anything you're planning that's going to affect a weekend service is all on the same page, and we want to have fun, but we're not doing it just to have fun. We're doing it to get to a transcendent moment.
Yeah. And so that's when we're getting into like brainstorms and things like that. I'll briefly talk about kind of our structure, but spend more time on the brainstorm. But we run 8 weeks out on messages and series and titles. And so our lead pastor, Seth, and you work on that and get us what the series is. And then about 10 weeks out, I'm knocking on Seth's door to go, hey, I need the synopsis for that series, because in 2 weeks from now, I'm putting it in front of the creative team and we're going to start working on it. And so he gets me a synopsis of the series. It's usually a couple of paragraphs that really just is the heart of where we're trying to go. And then we'll go back and forth. I'll ask some questions on do you have any specific examples from Scripture you're going to be using? Any stories from the Bible that you're going to get into? We may not know the exact week that he's going to do that, but we know the general idea and topics he's going to do. Sometimes we don't always have the topics. Sometimes we do. And so then we get into a brainstorm where we first and foremost and always pray, open it up. We'll give God some time. This past week, we even did a thing where we went around the room and just talked about what God was talking to us about in the Bible this week. What are we reading on our own personal time? And so we're keeping Him to the forefront of everything, even in the meeting. because that's what we want to come through more than anything else, to help ourselves get out of the way. And you'd be surprised how many times, in fact, there were 2 this last week, of things that came out in that time that we ended up using or potentially using in a service later that came from the scripture we were already involved in. And that's just God. Like, seriously, we spent a moment. Our prayer before we kicked off the service was praising him for the things he was already doing in us that we could see already for a series that was still 8 weeks away. Our church. And so it was just like, those are moments where you're just like, he's so big we can't even comprehend how big he is, and how all the different webs he weaves.
That right there. So this is a mind-blowing thing for people, but I'm like, well, I mean, you believe it, right? But you just relayed what I try to tell people all the time, that the Holy Spirit, like, God is present in the planning just as much as he's showing up in the moment. Like, he's just as much there. Like, he actually knows what's going to happen, if you can believe it or not.
It's crazy, isn't it? He may be all-knowing and all-powerful. I don't know. So, and we love those moments because, like, man, of course we know he's already in it, but we've already seen evidence he's in this series already, and it has happened. So then we get into, and again, this is kind of keeping those 2 things, the authenticity. By the way, did you know Webster declared authentic as the word of the year in 2023 because it was looked up more than almost anything else. And so the world is just craving authenticity and authenticness. I mean, think about all the AI that's going on, all the movies that are out about that. And so ironic, probably not, that God's Spirit is moving in that realm. Because there's no people that don't even know God are looking up the word authentic a ton of times. So
good point.
Anyway, authentic and biblical. So we typically get into first, and we did this last week as well, is like, what are the biblical stories that are coming to mind that fit this right now? What are all of the scripture that's coming to mind that fits all of this? And we all usually can come up with some things, but we're even Google searching things like that just to be looking and digging into that for ourselves. And so we're at this point, as you referenced, I think a couple of minutes ago, we call it a bad idea board.
Yep.
And the reason for that is we want to give everyone permission to say everything that they're thinking creatively.
Yep.
And so everything makes the board. In fact, we had Seth and you in a meeting a little bit later, and somebody said what everyone knew was a really bad idea. And what did I do?
We wrote it on the board.
We wrote it on the board because everything's got to go up there. And that's okay, because this isn't, we're doing these. This is just, we're just getting everything on the board. And you'd be also surprised, and you've seen it, Tim, in these meetings, how often scaffolding takes place from a bad idea that forms with another good idea to come up with a great idea. So
even like something where you're just like, you're going, there is no way we're doing that. But you may be like, but that one little thing that you said with that, you tie it in. Yep,
that absolutely happens. And so we get all those ideas on the board, and then we go, okay, what else is, so we've got all the scripture, we've got all that. What's going on in our world? We talk about those things, and then we just start to kind of piecemeal things. It's crazy to watch the ideas already starting to form in people before we even get to kind of the final turn, which is, all right, now what ideas do we have? And then I like flip charts. Some of our other people don't. They want just whiteboard after whiteboard. So I use both. We move to another board at that point, keeping all the ideas up because we want it in front of everybody. And then we start circling, doing that, looking at the things. Usually there are 2 or 3 that are, everyone in the room is like, yes, those are the ones. And we pursue those. And then there are a couple of the others that are like, nope, we're not doing those. And then there might be 1 or 2 that we kind of discuss, debate, if you will, have conversations about. But that's the brainstorm process from that standpoint. But again, keeping all the things in mind, like one of the ideas we just had this week, again, with prayer, which is a tier 2 thing, was we listed like probably 12 scripture that fit everything that was the topic in this brainstorm we did. And we were like, what if in the middle of a worship moment after the message, we just sat in the scripture while the band was playing, but not singing, and everything was dark and it was just black and white. And every single one of those scriptures came up, you read it. And like that to me is almost one of those, you're reading it yourself And that's a space for transcendence that really the screen, if anything, is leading you in.
Yep.
And so we're just like, let's do that one of these weekends on one of the really heartfelt messages that came up. So that's kind of the brainstorm process that we use.
Cool. So you go from there and execute it. Andrew talked a lot about executing those types of things. How do you evaluate, or do you evaluate coming out of a weekend? And then how do you go about doing that to ensure that, like, if you feel like a moment was missed or it didn't land like you thought, like, how do you assess that to make sure you can correct it or catch it earlier next time or whatever?
Yep. So on Monday, we have what's called execution meeting, which everybody laughs at because, but it's not what it is. It's the execution of the elements. So we do two things in that meeting. The first thing we do is it's right after the weekend, so it's still fresh. This stuff literally happened 24 hours before on a Sunday, because this meeting happens Monday, like 1:30 in the afternoon. And we spend the first chunk of the meeting evaluating every single thing that happened in the services. And just so you know, too, we have we have a Saturday night service. We evaluate after Saturday night any tweaks that need to happen going into Sunday services. There aren't always a lot, but it's worth it if there are 2 or 3 minor things that you didn't, until it actually happened, you didn't know that it wasn't going to work, or that it worked, or that it could work even better if we added this element to it. So we do that too. But
you might as well. You got the break there. Like, if it's an easy win, because otherwise you're just going, hey, this doesn't work. Let's do it 2 more times.
Right. And we've got time after the service to make a couple of tweaks. Usually they're not major things, but we will do that. But on the Monday meeting, we evaluate the whole service, and we will start with pulling up the framework and reviewing the framework.
Okay.
So we go through authenticity and biblical. How did we do with that? Was there anything that was inauthentic? Was there anything that came out of that wasn't biblical, or did not get delivered? A lot of times we're obviously not going in intentionally ever to do that.
Yeah.
But there could be a moment where it's like, that didn't come off the way we wanted. And a lot of times we catch those on Saturday, or if it's really that, we'll catch it right after the service and we'll have a conversation with somebody that it didn't and usually those are speaking elements if they come off that way.
Yeah. It's generally, I would say, even to back up our worship people and stuff, it's because maybe it's their first time they did it and they were nervous and they're like, I know what I said, I can't believe I said it. And
usually it's not something that's like so unbiblical it's a problem. And sin was created in front of the church or something like that. It's usually just like a small thing, like, hey, it was Matthew 5:13, not 5:12, but we want to be precise in those things. So what we filter through those, and then we filter through all of the other elements that are in tier 2. And if we had any tier 3 items, we filter through those as well. And we're evaluating. One of the things that's most important for our team in that moment is we have to have established trust. We have to know that we are for each other, that we love each other. And then even though you have those things, does not give you permission to run someone down in the meeting. You have to measure and carefully approach how you're saying things. If there's a constructive thing, it's got to be constructive and not destructive in its nature.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. If you're trying to pursue transcendent moments, being a jerk doesn't get you to godly things. So approach it with life-giving and fruit-giving ways to make a difference in somebody's life, help them get healthier or better or whatever. Yeah. And
the goal of it was, hey, we missed the mark just a little, and so that we learn from it. So, and I'll talk about that in just a second. But anyway, we go through all that, and I would just say transparency has to be there in that meeting, in the review of the previous weekend's execution. Because if you're not honest about it, you're not going to fix it. You're not going to learn from it. You're not going to get better at it. And a lot of the times they are general things that you will be repeating again anyway, and there just need to be minor tweaks. But we have to have that, and we have to say those things. And not all of our hosts aren't in there. Our lead pastor, our speaking pastor is not in there. But if there are those moments, Andrew or myself will talk with the host, and I'll talk with whoever the speaking pastor was if there are any moments like that. But the team evaluates everything.
Yeah. Well, as we did from Saturday to Sunday in the episode with Seth, when I said that you we're like, hey, you didn't say you're idle. Are you sure you like, what was that all about? Yeah. So we even referenced one in the last episode. Yeah.
Yeah. And a lot of that is the trust I have that you want that, even if you don't love it. And there's, and that's again gained over time. So you've got to establish that culture and let it live for a little while before you can get into that. So I'm super grateful we have that kind of culture. And then hang
on 1 second, because I want to lean into that even more aggressively.
Yeah.
Because I am one of our teaching pastors, and that is what I do. I do not love everything that I hear all the time, but when I leave that stage and we finally dismiss the service and I do all the goodbye type stuff, and then I go back in, the first person I'm looking for is John to go, anything I need to do with that. That is the first thing. You have to carry that heart of humility. You have to carry that heart that, like, if you truly want it to be everything it could be under God, you have to seek people that can see things and give you feedback and correct it so that it can be even better as you move forward. Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, and I would say this too, to compliment you, but also for everybody else out there that's in that situation. I can't tell you what it does to establish confidence in anything I might say, that you seek it out.
Yeah.
And if you're trying to establish a culture of this, it has to start with the lead people from the weekend, and you have to go seek it out over and over. You may have to do it for 2 months until your people get you really want the feedback.
Yeah.
Like you actually want it. And that gives me and everybody else a comfort level to do that. And even when I take it from the team to you or Seth or a host or whatever, we report back, hey, they received it and they're going to work on it, or things like that, because they need to know, like, the follow-up. Otherwise, like, did it happen? Did they take the advice? Did they not like it? And sometimes we come back and we're like, hey, they were actually trying to do this with this, and we just didn't understand that that's what they were going for. So that happens too.
Yeah. So with that, who would you say, let's say it's the main lead pastor, let's say that it's even church of like 150, 200. They may have one other person on staff, maybe an office manager or something. Who are the people that you would say they need to look for to get that feedback after a weekend or a service or something?
I mean, obviously, if you've got an associate pastor, you've got a worship leader, even your top key level volunteers, they're in a place that you've put them in that place. Like, they've earned that. God has given them talents and gifts that you trust to be in front of the church already. Those are the people I would go to first, your highest level of leaders from a volunteer perspective. And be selective. It's kind of like, you don't just go ask someone to be your accountability partner for your life. You observe them. You get to know them. You have a conversation with them. You ask them to be in that place in your life. Sometimes they say, I don't want to do that because I just have I have a hard time speaking truth to the person in charge. That's not the person. You also don't want the person that comes up to you every Sunday after a message and tells you it is the greatest thing every week. And they're like, I don't know how you did it, but I thought last week was the greatest, but you did it again. Yeah. Like, that's not the person you want either.
And you probably don't want the person that would do the opposite of that.
You do not. For sure. That is not who you're looking for.
Another bomb. Way to go. Yep.
Plus, you don't need that every week. That would not be good for your health.
I would change everything again.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Moving forward, wherever you were going next with that.
Yeah, you're good. The second part. So that's like, we're looking at the whole service, but we are literally, we will literally start by talking about the framework again, and then we will go through every element again and discuss what happened, what was supposed to happen, and then we review whatever anybody wants to point out from those. So we do that line by line, if you will. And then at the end of it, we look at the whole service and we even grade the entire service, including the speaking, every single element from the time the countdown started on the thing, all the way to the song that we played as everyone was being dismissed, whether it was through our system or it was an actual band walking everybody out, because that matters. Yeah. Sometimes you can wreck a feeling as people are leaving the room by just hitting shuffle on your worship playlist. And so we even choose the song a lot of times that comes first or last that are bookended to the service. So anyway, then we rank the service from, was it great, good, so, not good. And the most important part of that is all of the things that come after that are bigger pictures. So that we're in the little little things in the first part, and then we go, how did that affect the whole thing? And what can we, and this is the most important, this is what we record. How can we learn from that so that when this comes up again, we can come back to this week, look and say, we learned to do it this way, or we learned it doesn't work in that way when we come back. So that's a key element of it as well.
All right, cool.
Yep.
How do you?
And the back half of the meeting is just looking at the execution for the next upcoming 2 weeks in detail. And then the third and fourth week, we do a 30,000 foot look at just to make sure things are on track.
Okay. With that, how do you store that to quickly access like past evaluation?
Yeah, it's just in a Google Sheet document that we've created by week. And it says what the ranking that we gave it overall is. And then there's an entire notes column, which goes on forever sometimes because the notes are, in some weeks, they're really, like if it's a great week, there are a ton of notes about why we felt like there was transcendence. It was good. If it's not so good week, there's lots of notes there too, usually, so that we can learn from it.
Yeah, good. And then you just keep moving forward little by little. Cool.
Yeah.
Are there any other elements that I don't even know to ask about?
I'm not sure there is. I think, okay. Maybe the other obvious is Seth is not, you are not, the speakers are not in that meeting.
Yeah.
And so it is regular almost every week that I ask Seth, hey, anything from you for service to get outside perspective. And then I will ask occasionally, intentionally, usually, I don't usually organically do this.
Yeah.
Every couple of weeks, I'll ask non-creative team, but staff members for some feedback on the service and different elements to this. A lot of times, especially when we're like trying something, I will go, hey, I won't even tell them what my thoughts or I won't even tell them the reason we did it. I'll just say, how did that moment hit you? What did God do in that? Did God do anything in that moment? And that's a lot of times really good feedback as well, because they don't know what we were shooting for. Yeah. And so they can tell me without me even asking, did we hit it or did we miss in that moment with that song, that whatever it was.
Yeah. And I'll get those texts from you too. Just like, especially if we're in a weekend and it's a bigger weekend and something like that. I'm sure here coming up Easter weekend, that may happen where you're just like, hey, how's it going over there? Like, just to make sure it's replicating. Yeah. Yeah.
And if anybody's watching, listening that has a multi-site campus, the reason I do that is things do not hit the same way at a multi-site as they always do at the broadcast campus.
Yeah. It could be positive, negative both ways, where it's like, man, it was awesome here. I'm like, it was nothing. Like, man, and sometimes I'm even shocked, or, either way, where I'm like, whoa, that didn't do anything with you guys. Like, that was like killer out here. Like, that was incredible. Like, we should do it every week. It was so good. And you're like, yeah, nothing.
And just a real life application for us in that it doesn't happen it doesn't happen a lot anymore. Correct. But there are certain songs that do really well at different campuses that don't at others. And every blue moon will keep a song. We have the ability, we want you to keep a song going a little longer at a campus or kill one if it's just not going well. Yep. Most of the time, it hasn't happened in a couple of years now that we've done that. But that's a real life application of sometimes it needs to keep going there and it didn't work here and we need to tweak it here or there or whatever the multi-site situation is. And then I try always to watch the online message, at least one of the three. If I'm not watching it live, I'll watch it during, I obviously do not listen to all three messages. Sorry to tell you that every weekend, Tim, but I'll go back during the 9 o'clock service and I'll have been in the room for worship watching that, but I will go back in my office and rewatch the entire worship through the lens of the stream, watching for camera shots, angles. Did the talking moment that the worship leader had come off the same in the room as it did online? Because that's a whole nother campus as well itself and a very different way of watching the service.
Yeah, we didn't really talk about this when I talked to Andrew on communications, but just going off of that point, with that, we are seeking transcendence even on an online level. We want them to experience moments with God as well that are very transcendent. And if you go to our YouTube page, Metro Community Church and go to our YouTube page. Like, we are literally taking clips. Like, the clips that you're getting are, a lot of times, they're just straight off of the online feed. Like, we didn't do anything to it. We didn't enhance the video. We didn't enhance the audio. We just went, here you go. That was easy. And we posted it. And it's because we keep seeking that excellence.
Yep, Tim, I lost sound from you.
Hang on. It is. Let me get back to it. This happened with Andrew too.
I think it's just muted.
There we go. You got me now? You got me now? You got me now?
Yep, gotcha.
Okay. I'm just going to edit that out. And
I figured.
We'll go 3 seconds here. Do you have anything else before?
Yeah, I want to add one more thing, so I'll just start talking if that's cool.
Okay.
You can just edit it and pick right back up.
Yep, 3 seconds and then go.
Yeah, and Tim, as you mentioned the communications process, this is just one of the coolest things that we've just kind of stumbled across that really has served transcendence in communications as well as transcendence in service. And we just did this for the first time at Christmas, and we're doing it right now for Easter. Mm-hmm. And it has been there's some of my favorite moments that have happened in service in the last 5 months. Obviously, we want to communicate. We have to communicate service times and things that are going on, the logistics of Christmas and Easter, because we have different service times. We add a service, things like that. And we do those in the hosting. But one of the things that we've done that we started at Christmas, and we're doing again at Easter, is we're taking whatever the theme is that our pastors are going to be speaking about at Easter. So, for example, I'll use Easter as the example. Our theme is, the series is called Upon a Skull, and the goal is for people to feel the weight and the heaviness of all that Jesus went through for us, that entire time leading to the cross, the crucifixion before that, all of that. And we have taken those moments and thought in our own lives, what are moments where we've experienced immense pain and immense sorrow, and just almost those moments in life where you're so emotionally wrought on the inside that you have a physical response to it. So the example was, multiple examples. Jesus was betrayed by Peter and denied by him. He was denied by him. We looked and went to our host and said, does anyone have a moment where you were denied in your life by someone? We've got one up this weekend where a guy had never met his father, and while he was in college, got a chance to meet him, and his father said, I don't want to meet him. And then he's going to share that moment, and then he's going to share what Jesus felt when Peter denied him 3 times, and then relate that to, I have felt that. What an amazing thing it is to know that I don't have some God that's far off sitting on a throne drinking wine with a crown on his head and his feet laid back. He experienced denial by his best friend. Yeah. The worst. And so my Savior gets what I went through. And how amazing it is that because of what Jesus did on Easter, because of him going to the cross and raising from the dead, that's who I get to talk to. Like, he understands what I went through. And then we'll move that's in the middle of worship. And it didn't come from a place, but that's promoting the Easter series in the service without standing up there going, the series is going to be great and you should be there on time. And we need to do those things. Hear me. We're doing those things. But you want to move someone, you want to have a transcendent moment that they're now anticipating what's going to happen at Easter, and is not just I hate to dog standard promotions because I have a marketing degree and spent years in that, and those things are necessary, but this moves your heart and your spirit, which gets you excited, anticipating what God's going to do, and their moments in the moment. It's not just a promotion of it. They're transcendent moments. And so we started that at Christmas with peace moments, because that was what our series was about, explaining our own peace moments, and we're doing it this Easter. And so that has been so good for in the service, and foreshadowing and creating anticipation for what's coming in the upcoming series.
Yeah, it's phenomenal foreshadowing. It also lets you know people a little bit more where you're like, man, I did not know that is what's gone on with them. Or because when you're standing on a stage, it can feel just distant. Like, well, yeah, what I'm experiencing, they're not. We do the same thing with God, right?
Yeah.
Like where we're like, well, he couldn't experience, like he's God, he can't experience, like they're on a stage singing or preaching, they can't experience what I'm, and it's like, no, I've experienced it, and God has to, and it's these things. And then when you get to the service, it's a callback moment because obviously on Easter, we're going to cover the death, burial, resurrection of Jesus. And so all those thoughts are going to come flooding back of the callback moments where like Seth doesn't have to relay all of that again. It just happens within their soul. Yeah.
Yep. So those have been that's been one of the greatest things that have come out of this framework and that we're using that's very practical. In fact, just go watch one of the 4 weeks. If you're watching this, go back to 2024, March, and watch any of the 4 services we had inside of worship, and you'll see 4 different people come up on stage and deliver those moments. And you want to talk about one of the most authentic things we can do is share the pain in our lives, but also share the redemption and the comfort that God gives, and that his son gets it. He knows it. He experienced it. And he's the one we go to for help and healing.
Yeah. I hope if you're a pastor out there, worship leader, I don't even care, just a church person just trying to go like, how do I follow my pastor well? Like what I hope you're hearing is that this stuff is not complicated. Like it's very simple and practical if you're just willing to do it. It's hard work. Like you have to assess it and you have to take time to plan it and stuff. But man, is it so simple, and it has dramatically shifted our services, like dramatically.
Yeah.
It's hard. It is hard to explain how much it's shifted our services.
Yeah, it is. I can't even begin to quantify it. We wish you could feel our hearts, everybody, because it has.
And it's not a show. It is transcendent moments. Like you're experiencing God, and it's like, how do you do better than that? And it's like, I don't know, experiencing him again. Let's all. I think I could
keep aiming for that again, over and over and over again. And the anticipation. I mean, there's no. Again, back to the little bit of the marketing thing, there's no conversation you can have with someone that says, hey, bring someone and invite them back next week that is better than I experience God. I've got to be back next week because God moved in my life, and I want everyone to experience this.
Yeah, I don't care if you're coming. I'm coming next week.
Yes. Yes. But there's also when someone comes to you and shares that, it's a different invite.
Yeah.
You can feel it. And then they're like, you wouldn't believe what God did to me. And they can share the story if they will. And then say, and you don't even have to say, come with me. They'll be like, I may need to check this place out because God's changing you. And I can see it happening in your life. There's no better testimony than that.
There isn't. I'm going to preach on that this weekend.
Perfect.
All righty, man. Thank you so much for being here. This was fun.
Hey, thanks for having me. Yeah. Hope it's helpful to everybody and you find some tidbits you can take back and actually implement. And man, anything you think you see, feel, please send us feedback and things that you're doing. If you implement some of this or other things you're doing, man, it is a two-way street. We'd love to hear from you. Check out our website, hit us with an email. We can always get better, learn from each other.
Yep. We want to hear, and we will gladly share. So as we already are, but we would gladly do more. So thanks so much for being here, John.
You got it. See you, Tim.
Okay. See you. John is a great guy. He's a great leader at Metro. And I just appreciate how strategic he is, how he can build a system, but he doesn't build a system just to have for it to lose its life. He actually builds system and thinks strategically so that it can give it life when it shows up in real life. I think you saw that, and I hope you got some idea of the system he's put in place, but also how it can be applied and how you can have fun and see God moments and transcendent moments come to life for people within a weekend, within a service. So I hope you enjoyed that episode. We have our next series is going to be focused on Sabbath and rest and just taking care of your self, taking care of your soul. And so we're going to be having a few people on to cover that topic. Looking forward to those episodes. I hope you'll check them out. Once again, if you'll like, subscribe, do all those things, it really does help. I am catching many of you. It is growing a little bit. It's fun to hear back from you, whether you catch me out here in real life or whether you catch me online. I really do appreciate the feedback and hearing back from you. Looking forward to the conversation. Keep continuing to go on as we continue in the episodes here through 2024. Thank you for being here, and I'll see you next time.